Let's bring in Andrew Borene, Senior Fellow at the National Security Institute. He's also a board member at Special Operations Association of America. Andrew, it would seem like Vladimir Putin and the Russians have their hands full just trying to eke out some kind of victory in Ukraine, where they're not doing very well. What are they doing sending jets over Poland and now Estonia?
Well, thanks for having me again, John. I really appreciate it. These are critical issues that the American public really needs to start understanding just how hot the conflict is becoming with our European allies. And I'll start by saying that these are not isolated incidents and they are not accidents. In my assessment, these are very deliberate efforts by President Putin and the Russian military to see how far they can go into NATO proper territory, into those precious inches of NATO that we discuss when we talk about defending every inch of NATO. And it's an active probe to see how far and how much they can get away with, keeping things at an Article 4 consultation level, which is essence, hey, let's have an emergency meeting of leaders. We might investigate the incident versus an Article 5 issue, which is going to trigger collective defense. The only time in history that collective defense has been triggered and used was after the attacks of September 11, 2001 upon the United States. So in my assessment, this is a very active escalation of very much a Russian hybrid warfare effort and a machine that is seeking to cause disunity among the United States and its strongest European allies.
Well, the Russians say that this was, well, they say it was not an incursion. They say that they were flying in international airspace. Do you buy that, first of all?
No, I don't buy that.
All right, so if it was an intentional incursion, what's their goal?
Like I said, the goal is to see how much they can get away with. I think that President Trump and the White House have really leaned forward in saying the last several years of sanctions are not sufficient to bring Vladimir Putin and the Russian, call it a hybrid war effort, to the negotiating table. Without secondary sanctions that target Russian oil, without secondary sanctions that target other Russian energy exports, that remove their kind of what we call a shadow fleet of shipping, and that allows them access to international trade and funding. Without, other allies like Brazil, India, and other BRICS nation members helping to enforce secondary sanctions, the Russian regime has ample resources to continue and grind a painful, costly war that has been targeting Ukrainians for 3 years now.
But didn't the European Union just approve another round of sanctions on Russia?
They did, and in my assessment, that's a good indicator that there remains a great deal of political unity on issues of common defense. We do see a lot in the news about issues related to trade and economic policy, but I think that this is an indication that when it comes to the defense of those precious inches of NATO, there is a full stop boundary where NATO stands up. And I think a critical thing to think about here as we look at it as Americans, and I live in London, I spend a lot of time traveling Europe. We need to remember we have asked the Europeans for decades to pony up more for their own organic defense capabilities. They need to have stronger armies. They need to have a defense industrial base. They need counter-drone technologies. They need artillery rounds and factories that produce these things. So this is a moment when we really need to ask the Europeans to start deploying the 800 billion euro in a Rearm Europe package that they have pledged. And I think despite, many of the, like I said, there are trade and economic issues that have arisen. But when it comes to things like the safety of America, the safety of our Western European allies, the safety of innocent civilians in Ukraine who've been targeted in these horrible Shahed waves of drone attacks for 3 years and missile attacks and hypersonic attacks, in addition to ground forces in their country. I think that this is potentially a moment when we will see Europe step up in its own right to be a partner, a full partner in the NATO spend and in the NATO defense industrial base and military capacity effort.
We'll certainly be watching this story, see if Vladimir Putin and the Russians continue to make these kinds of incursions. Andrew Borene. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you very much. These are really important issues, and I always appreciate being on with you, sir.
Thanks.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.